Palestinian terrorist who was an American victim of Palestinian terrorism that has been brought to these shores for prosecution and conviction and for punishment. Unfortunately, the most recent victim of Palestinian terrorism, the most recent American victim, I should say, is Taylor Force. Taylor Force was a wonderful young American who served our country, had 2 tours of duty, one in Iraq and one in Afghanistan, came back to our country completely unscathed, and unfortunately was in Israel and was tragically stabbed to death while walking close to the beach in Tel Aviv. We are absolutely honored and humbled to have Robbie and Stuart Force with us today. We are very, very grateful that Robbie and Stuart has taken their tremendous pain and turned it into love and healing for others. And they have used this pain for the Taylor Force Act, which conditions aid to the Palestinian Authority on the end of acts of terrorism, the ends of incitement for terrorism, and most particularly on the ends of this disgusting kind of methodology that they have on the Palestinian Authority books of the more innocent civilians that they slay, the greater the payment. And that means that it incentivizes terrorism. And we're extremely, extremely grateful to Congressman Doug Lamborn and to Lindsay Schneider because it was Doug Lamborn who initially introduced the Taylor Force Act, which has successfully passed the United States House of Representatives. But as you know, in order for a bill to become law, we have 2 houses here, and it has to pass the Senate, and we are waiting for the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, to make some time for a debate and to bring this to the floor. We are also unbelievably honored today to have Nitzana Darshan-Leitner with us. Nitzana is a remarkable woman who started Shurat Hadin, the Israeli Law Center, and their motto is bankrupting terrorism, one lawsuit at a time. Nitzana and along with some other attorneys have had hundreds of millions of dollars damages claimed through the courts. And what she is trying to do is to turn off the money spigot that funds these terrorists and make it absolutely impossible for them to continue with these acts. And now she, and Nitzana, as you can see from her lovely brochure, does much more than just that. She's also the author of an amazing book that I am reading right now called Harpoon, which is very, very, very gripping and hard to put down, which talks about the money laundering of terrorism. And so she is trying to turn off the money spigots towards terrorism. One of the things that she is embarking on now, and we at Met really would love to partner with her and help her, is the fact that terrorist groups that are listed in our State Department as terrorist groups are able to take out pages in Facebook. This is unbelievably pernicious because it recruits and reinforces and incites many, many young people to engage in acts of terrorism, which is the 21st century scourge. And we know that there are many, many lonely people, marginalized people sitting in attics and basements across the globe who somehow might be inspired by these Facebook pages. And this is something that we absolutely have got to put a stop to. So that is going to be another kind of legislative initiative that we can embark on together. And before I introduce Nitzana, I would like to also thank Stand With Us and the Republican Jewish Coalition. And Noah Silverman is here as a member for also helping to sponsor this event. We're profoundly honored to have Stuart Force, Tyler Force's father, say a few words. Thank you so much.
I'm sort of caught in the middle, Robbie and I, both of these discussions, both the funding of terror and the social media implications of the growth of terror. We lost Taylor 2 years ago tomorrow. And after going through denial, grief, depression, despair, and closing up the earthly part of Taylor's life. He closing up apartment, selling truck, things like that. That no parent should ever have to be responsible for. We returned home. We received an email from Sandra Gerber from New York, and Sandra sent us a PDF file, and he also sent us a link to a YouTube video, and they both had a profound effect on us. I'll start with the PDF file. It was a translation into English of the Palestinian Authority law that mandates payments of rewards, paper slave, to Palestinian terrorists that kill Israelis and Americans who happen to be visiting Israel. It puts down exact dollar amounts for whatever crime is committed. The worse the crime, the higher the dollar amount. Sandra put us in touch with Senator Lindsey Graham and Congressman Lamborn, and that resulted in the Teleforce Act being introduced in both houses to cut off U.S. funding that goes to the Palestinian Authority until they can certify that the money is not being used to pay their terrorists to kill people and injure people. I just received a message or an email yesterday. For 2018, the Palestinian Authority has allocated $408 million to fund the bureaucracy and actual payments to terrorists or terrorist families if they're martyred, if they're killed while they're committing the crime. $408 million. That money could be used to benefit the Palestinian people much better than inciting them to kill innocent people. So Congressman Lamborn will speak more about the progress of the act, both in the House and the Senate. The House has already passed their version, as Sarah said, and we're doing everything we can. We're in Washington this week, knocking on doors and saying, come on, let's get this done. The other side, the other part of the email was the link to a YouTube video. The YouTube video showed the Palestinians celebrating the death of our son that evening, celebrations throughout Palestine, and also celebrated the proclamation of his killer as a martyr for Palestinian youth. The social media, the Facebook, the Twitters, the Instagrams, people don't realize how important that part of the war on terror is. The lawsuit that we're involved in, we're the principals, the Force family, is an attempt to make Facebook, for example, more socially responsible. Right now, terrorists and terrorist organizations are free, basically free to put anything they want out there on the web to recruit, incite, educate, and coordinate attacks. And it's like, I'd like to compare this to the Army. They have a command and control system where they command their troops and they control the troops. In this case, it's done on the internet. One of the hearings that they had for this lawsuit to force Facebook to become more socially responsible, occurred in the federal district court in New York, and Robbie and I were in the courtroom during there was a hearing on an appeal that Facebook brought. Facebook lawyers were an army of Armani suit-clad lawyers, and the force group lawyer was more intelligent than all of the other lawyers on the other side put together. But what's important here was the judge was asking questions about Facebook that in his position, that should be common knowledge. He should know, be more intimate with the workings of Facebook and how it affects people's lives. He wasn't. And it's not his fault. He wasn't brought up in the younger generation where you grew up with Facebook, with cell phones, with Twitter, where you talk to your friends on I won't even say daily, I'd say minute-by-minute basis. I'm glad to see so many staffers here because staffers will play an important role going forward in this battle to make laws more accurate, more timely in this attempt to rein in social media. I believe in free speech, don't get me wrong, but I don't believe in hate speech. I don't believe in communication that is totally disrupting our safety, our security, and inciting terrorism. I'll make a quick comparison. For those of you at my age, there was something in the late 60s, early 70s called the Anarchist Cookbook. It was a below the radar, for lack of a better word, a thick magazine that gave recipes about how to get free long-distance calling, how to make a smoke bomb, how to disrupt communications, how to, on such a small scale, how to be an anarchist. The book was not allowed to be sold. There were, what are they called? Illegal copies that circulated. Nowadays, you can go on the internet and they can tell you how to make a nuclear bomb. You can go on the dark web and you can buy the ingredients. There's no such thing as paying for long distance anymore. Somebody's paying for internet access, but you have FaceTime, you have Skype. It's out of control. It is really something that needs to be addressed. The young staffers are so savvy in social media, and they have the ear of the congressman. So when these laws come up, they can provide input that is so important to this whole process. They can educate them. I think it's their obligation, your obligation, I'm speaking to the staffers, to don't be silent on this issue. Be aggressive. Be proactive on getting laws that will. It's not about the money. It's not about. That's what the Taylor Force Act is. That's what other legislation is, to deprive the terrorists of their money. This is to stop this avenue of spread and incitement of terrorism. And one thing that is very important is, to the staffers especially, this is time-sensitive work. Every day that goes by, we are playing catch-up. And the terrorists they're not constrained by any rules, by any laws. They are innovating. They're coming up with new ways to get the word out, to incite people, to recruit. Staffers have the ability, the knowledge, and the energy to address this problem. And I hope to gosh that you leave here energized and wanting to be a part of this. We are, Force Family is in this both ways. The the Taylor Force Act and for reining in social media, letting them be socially responsible. And as Robbie and Kristen, our daughter, and I know, this is a matter of life and death for everyone and anyone. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We have the honor and the privilege to represent the family of Stuart and Robbie Force for the death of their son, Taylor Force. We represent the Force family. Because of me?
No,
I'm not required of saying.
Keep going, it's gonna go.
We represent the Force family in, thank you, in two different lawsuits. One against Iran, because the murderer that killed Taylor belonged to the Hamas organization. We were able to link the attack to this horrible terror organization and to link it to Iran that supports Hamas. This case is going forward. The other case is a case against Facebook. The case was filed in the Federal District Court of New York, and it's going forward as well. Our goal in this event in the Capitol Hill, it concentrates more on the second lawsuits, those against the social media. We realize that the social media is an essential tool in the operations of the terror organizations. They use it as something they did not use before and cannot do without. They send their propaganda, they send their messages, they recruit militants, they raise funds on the social media. They call people to go and kill innocent victims like Taylor Force. And our goal as a civil rights organization that fights terrorism is to stop this. So when we leave this room, I wanted to take two things from here, and they are in the two booklets that you are holding. One is how to fight this incitement to kill on the social media. How can we really bring the social media to stop this providing of services of conduct to the terror organizations? And I will speak about it. The other one is Shurat Adin. So perhaps I will start just with a background about Shurat Adin, because I do see familiar faces, but for the one who do not know our organization, I will give you how we started, but I cannot do it without introducing to you Harpoon. Harpoon was a secret unit in the Mossad that tracked terror funding. It was established by the legendary head of the Mossad, Meir Dagan, in 1996. That was 3 years into the Oslo Accords, where we Israelis were promised peace. We were promised that there will be a halt to terrorism, the PLO will change, Yasser Arafat will become Baal Tshuva. But instead we got bloodshed, we got suicide bombing, drive-by shooting, ambushes on a daily basis, hundreds of people getting killed on the street of Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. And Meir Dagan was the counterterrorism advisor for the prime minister at the time. And he was looking for ways to stop this terrorism, but for non-conventional ways. Meir Dagan, and I write about it in the book, hated wars. Indeed, he was one of the bravest Israeli soldiers that ever lived. And his image is as a pirate with a dagger between his teeth. But he could not bear the loss of Israeli soldiers' life. So he was looking for ways to see if he can stop this terrorism without sacrificing the life of the IDF soldiers. And he realized something that others did not. When he was looking at the terrorists, he didn't see just the one individual who was wearing explosive vests and blowing himself up. He did not see just the one who was holding a knife and stabbing passengers. He did not see the one that was holding a machine gun and shooting towards all the people in the crowd. He saw an industry. He saw networks of terrorists teaming up and supported by the outside community. Tens of millions of dollars being raised in Iran, in Saudi Arabia, in Syria, coming through and winding up in the bank accounts of the terror organizations. He saw local Muslim communities raising funds and sending into the West Bank and Gaza to fund these terrorists. So he realized that if he wants to stop the flow of terrorism, he must stop the flow of the money. He went to back then Prime Minister Netanyahu and asked him to form a task force that its only goal will be to fight terror financing. Netanyahu agreed, and they established Harpoon. So Harpoon was a secret unit, covert operation, that had representatives from the Mossad, from the Shin Bet, from the military, from the defense ministry, and they have one goal: follow the money, target the money, kill the money. Money was the oxygen to the terrorism, and they were determined to choke it off. In my book, I talk a lot about different operations that Harpoon took. Covered operations that now became public. Yes, we did have to fight with the censor in Israel. But these operations illustrate how creative and innovative Israel had to be in order to fight this new wave of terrorism. Going after their source of money. Today, when we have a new form of terrorism, lone wolves that almost have no connection to the established terror organizations, we have to find other ways to fight them. We had a front seat watching the operations of Harpoon and taking part in some of them. We were young lawyers. It was 2000. It was the beginning of the Intifada, the second Intifada. Again, hundreds of people getting killed on the street of Jerusalem, of Tel Aviv, and we thought that as lawyers we can take a role in the war against terrorism by doing what lawyers do best, go after the pocketbooks of the terror organizations. So we simply started filing lawsuits against terror organizations and their financial patrons. Hamas, Islamic Jihad, PLO, Palestine Authority, Iran, Syria. And in 2 years, we started winning in court. We got decisions in our favors. We got a judgment against Iran for $180 million. We got an unprecedented decision saying that the Palestinian Authority is not a state as they claim. They don't have sovereign immunity. We can sue them in the courts in the United States and Israel. We put a lien on the Palestinian Authority's money that is being collected by Israel, tax money, for 64 million shekels on a case that we filed on behalf of the 2 soldiers that were lynched in Ramallah in the beginning of the Intifada. And then we were approached by Meir Dagan and his Harpoon agents asking if we can utilize the same means we have in court by going after those who facilitate the transactions with the terror organizations, the banks. In their operations, they gathered a lot of information, and Meir Dagan had a slogan that information that it gained in secret operations and not used is just a waste. So they gave us the information and asked us if we can file lawsuits against banks that provided financial services to the terror organizations. And we agreed, because this is what we like to do. And we filed lawsuits against Arab banks, European banks, Chinese banks, Lebanese banks. It was very successful. The effect of these lawsuits were twofold. One, the terror victims received compensations. Ella Abu Qassis was only 17 years old when she was walking one Shabbat with her brother, 15 years old, coming back from Bnei Akiva youth movement in Sderot, when the red alert went off. This is the alarm that goes on when the missiles are falling from Gaza. In Tel Aviv, you have 90 seconds to find a shelter. In Ashdod, which is a little bit southern than Tel Aviv, you have 60 seconds to find a shelter. In Sderot, you have 15 seconds to find a shelter. So she was walking down the street. It was a bare street. There was no building, no bus stop to hide underneath them. So the only thing that went into her mind is to protect her brother. She fell over her brother. She covered him. The missile fell right near their heads. Many sharp nails went into their both heads. She fought for 7 days on her life in the hospital. She died. Her brother is disabled for life. We decided that we are not letting kill our children and keep silent, and we will file a lawsuit against the bank that provided financial services to Hamas at the time. It was a gigantic bank. Filed a lawsuit in the Federal District Court of New York, and we won. The family of Ella Abu Qassis will receive compensations. But the effect of this lawsuit, as the other lawsuit that we filed, was gained immediately after we filed it. We didn't have to wait until the end that we get a judgment. Because the moment we filed the lawsuit, the bank shut down the accounts that belonged to the terror organizations. This lawsuit sent a shockwave through the international banking system that no bank agreed anymore to open bank account to a designated terror organization. No bank agreed even to provide financial services to Islamic charity that identifies with the organization. They don't want to take the risk. They don't want to have a judgment against them for hundreds of millions of dollars that declares that they are aiding and abetting terrorism. The Congress will not let them operate in the United States with such a judgment against them. And no bank agreed to operate anymore in terror zones like South Lebanon or Gaza. There is no banking system in Gaza. This is why we see them smuggle money into Gaza with suitcases in cash through the tunnels, through the money changers. But that caused Hamas a great deal of harm because they need to bring hundreds of millions of dollars into the Gaza Strip. They run a government. They need to provide the population in Gaza with all services they need from cradle to grave in order to gain back their loyalty, to continue to shoot missiles towards Israel from their backyards, to use them as human shields, to operate among civilians. That costs a lot of money. They need to support their military. They have tens of thousands of soldiers. Sometimes they wear uniforms. Most of the time they don't, but they always get paid on a monthly basis. And they need to support their prisoners who are sitting in the Israeli jail. It's not only the Palestinian Authority with their new laws that allow this payment to the security prisoners, to the terrorists. It's also Hamas that gives money to the terrorists that range between $500 to $3,000 per month. Depends on the sentence they got, which depends on the number of Israelis they killed. And Hamas needs to keep arming itself to build their underground tunnels, to bring missiles into the Gaza Strip. To maintain all this infrastructure, Hamas budget stands today on $500 million. You need a bank to bring this money into the Gaza Strip. And every time we find a new bank that decided they don't care and they're taking the risk and bringing these millions of dollars into the Gaza Strip, we go and file a lawsuit against them, in the courts in the United States. These cases have been successful. Also, those sort of the cases against state-sponsored terrorism. Because we do have cases against Iran, against Syria, against North Korea. And to the one who think that they cannot collect this judgment, I have news for you. Yes, you can. You go after the assets that belong to this state-sponsored terrorism. You go after Iranian assets, Syrian assets, even North Korean assets. Just recently we found a boat that belonged to North Korea that smuggled weapons from Cuba into the North Korea area and went on a reef on the Mexico Gulf. The UN approached the Mexican government and told them to seize the boat because North Korea is under sanction. We heard about the boat. We hired a lawyer from Mexico City, put a lien on the boat. Just recently, we put a lien on the deal that Iran signed with Boeing to purchase 80 aircraft for $17 billion. We went to the court in Chicago, where Boeing has its headquarters, filed a motion saying that we have a judgment against Iran. We are entitled either to the Iranian money or to the aircraft. And believe me, we can use a jet. The court didn't know really what to do, because Boeing came and said that they cannot reveal the terms of the agreement to terror victims. They cannot make it public, because Iran might pull out of the agreement, which will affect the nuclear agreement. So the court approached the State Department for a position, and just recently the State Department came out with a position with a statement of interest saying that they recognize the rights of the victims to enforce their judgment, and they are not going to intervene with this case. The case is going forward against Boeing in the court in Chicago. But now we have a new problem, the lone wolves. How do you deal with this sort of new terrorism? Because if you were living in Israel or visiting Israel in the past 2 years, you will see that there are hundreds of stabbing attacks going on nearly on a daily basis until today. It did start in October 2015. It continues. The Shin Bet did a tremendous job to try to stop the stabbing attacks, and it does decrease, but it's still going on. And if you look at the perpetrators, if you look at those who are stabbing Jews, you see that they are very young people, 15 years old, 16 years old, teenagers. And you wonder what brings these teenagers to go and kill Israelis? What drives them to go to their mother's kitchen, grab a knife, and go and stab a Jew? And you realize that this is the incitement to kill. But the incitement that used to take place in previous intifadas, in the town squares, in the mosques, if you happen to be there, you would get rage and go and kill. Today, it's on the social media. Today, you will find these posts who are calling to kill Israelis, pages that name Stab the Jews, videos illustrating how to stab, how to push the knife, how to twist the knife, what poison to put on the knife before you go and stab, where to ambush the Jew, how to distinguish it, where he's usually go and visit, diagrams of human's body, where to slaughter him, what's the best place. And then others, perpetrators, according to the security services in Israel, have a Facebook page. They got tons of inciting posts, but they themselves wrote before they go and stab, we are going to become a shaheed, it's time to start a new intifada, it's time to liberate Al-Aqsa Mosque. And after they go and stab, you'll find tens of thousands of posts endorsing their acts, glorifying it, encouraging others to follow them. All this incitement is going on in Facebook because Facebook is the most popular social media networks in Israel, to the extent that Prime Minister Netanyahu called this wave of terrorism the Facebook Intifada. But he not only called it this way, he urged his ministers to go and meet with officials of Facebook and ask them to turn this incitement down. But Facebook refused. Facebook said they are only a neutral bulletin board. They are not getting involved with their users. They are not getting involved in the content. And they are not going to take a position in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So we decided to sue Facebook. We wanted to bring an injunction against them. But in order to overcome the issue of standing, we needed to get as many plaintiffs as possible to make a statement. We launched a campaign. Within 3 days, we got 20,000 Israelis joining this lawsuit. We ran the campaign on our Facebook page. And we filed this injunction in New York. The injunction was twofold. One, that Facebook will turn down this incitement, but the other, that Facebook will be proactive, that they will monitor this incitement and take it down. And we claim that Facebook has the tools, they have the algorithm to do that. The same way Facebook knows what type of coffee I drink in the morning, they know how to track these deadly words and take them down. Facebook filed a motion to dismiss. They claimed they were immune according to the Communication Decency Act. This is a law from 1996 that grants blanket immunity to social media networks. And this is why we are here this morning. We did file a response. We did say that when Congress legislated this law, which was well intended, they did not envision this sort of incitement that will cause people to go and kill. This type of words that create and clear an imminent danger are not protected by freedom of speech. We also claim that Facebook is not a neutral bulletin board. They are very involved with their users. They push ads, they push promotions, they make billions of dollars from these commercials. They offer friendship, they connect between people. They are the one who connect between those who call to kill to those who eventually go and do it. And lastly, we claim that Facebook does take a position in the conflict, depends to what side. And to prove this, we've opened 2 pages on Facebook, 2 identical pages. One page calls to kill Palestinians, the other page calls to kill Israelis. And we posted identical posts with identical images, just with one difference. One against Palestinians, the other against Israelis. And after 2 days, we asked Facebook to take down both pages. Facebook immediately took down the page that called to kill Palestinians. They sent us a fair message saying that they checked the page and it does not fit their community standards. But they left the Israeli page standing. They sent us a message saying that they checked the page and it does not violate their community standards. But we know we have a problem.
It's a scientific method.
The Communication Decency Act is an absolute law. There are no exceptions whatsoever to content. Anybody can put anything they want on the social media networks, and the social media networks will be immune. So we're looking for ways to see what Facebook should not be immune from, or could not be immune from. And I think we found it. It's aiding and abetting terrorism. In the United States, no American company is allowed to provide any sort of services to a designated terror organization. Bank is not allowed to open bank accounts to the leaders of Hamas, of Hezbollah, or Islamic Jihad. Facebook is not allowed to provide a platform to a designated organization as Hamas to send their propaganda, to recruit militants, to raise funds. This is prohibited according to the Anti-Terrorism Act. It's a law from 1993 that imposed criminal or civil liability on those who provide any sort of services to a designated organization. And this means monetary damages. So this brought us to gathered 5 families of terror victims that lost their loved ones in the recent wave of terrorism in Israel, and the family of Taylor Force among them, and filed a lawsuit against Facebook in New York for $1 billion. I don't have to talk about the victims, but I do want to mention, in addition to Taylor Force, one of them, Hallel Yafe Ariel. Hallel was a beautiful girl, blonde hair, blue eyes, an excellent student, a great ballet dancer. She was also only 13 years old. And one day they had a performance in her community, Kiryat Arba. She went with her parents, she danced. In the end of the evening they had a competition, she won, she was very happy, and in the end of the night they went back to sleep. She didn't have school the next day, so she stayed in bed when her parents left to work. And then a terrorist from the nearby village entered the community. He did not do it through the front gate. He made a cut in the fence that alerted the security services. They came riding on their jeep looking for the one who infiltrated the community. They did not find him. He was hiding behind a bush. When they left, drove away, he got up. He went to the first house he saw. He tried to open the door. The door was locked, so he went through the window. He wound up in Hallel's room. He was holding a knife, and he stabbed her 17 times in her bed until she died. He was 15 years old. He had a Facebook page where before he went to stab, he posted, "Death is a right, and I deserve this right." We cannot let Facebook sit in their ivory towers in Palo Alto when the blood is spilled on the streets of Jerusalem. We have to fight them back. We have to find them accountable. We have to teach them that as a social media network, they have social responsibility, and they have to take this incitement down, because words can really kill. And it's not only Facebook. Imagine ISIS without Twitter. Imagine ISIS without YouTube, without these beheading videos. Who would even know about ISIS? Who would even care about them? How would people from Switzerland, from Austria will know to go all the way to Turkey, cross the border to Iraq, to Syria, and join ISIS over there? Without these beheading videos, without these calls on the social media to come and join ISIS. CNN will not show these videos. New York Times will not put an ad to recruit militants to join ISIS. It's only on the social media. And this must stop. So we launched a campaign, a legal campaign, and social campaign, and public campaign, to wear the awareness for what's going on in the social media and what urgent need to find them accountable. We launched a campaign. This is the beginning of the campaign, this event in the Capitol Hill. And I want to approach and talk to the staffers of the Congress, of the senators that are here with us in this room, to bring this message, because the Communications and Decency Act has to change. The social media networks have to understand that if they will not change their policy on their own, it will be the legislator that will change it. This is the story of Shorat Adin. This is the story of Harpoon. This is where we need to face these days. Every day we get more and more calls for more and more terror victims who want to fight back, who are seeking justice, who more than anything else in the world don't want to be victims anymore. And we are dedicated to help them because we don't have any other choice. These cases bring justice to the terror victims. No money can bring back life. But money brings a closure. They deserve justice. And we have to make justice with the terrorists and those who sent them. We are able to get more than $2 billion in judgment so far, and we're able to collect $300 million that went to the terror victims. And we're doing the work that the government of Israel cannot do. This is why they need NGOs. This is why they need private people. The government of Israel is restrained, they have political considerations, they have foreign relationships they have to take into account, they have to be politically correct. We don't. We are a private, non-for-profit organization that represents private victims that have one goal, to bankrupt terrorism, one lawsuit at a time. Thank you very much.
There seems to be, a large problem here with the fact that the Anti-Terrorism Act prohibits U.S. Individuals and U.S. companies from having any contact at all with designated terrorist organizations. So basically, under U.S. law, if U.S. citizens and U.S. companies are not allowed to, for instance, be involved with Hezbollah or have any contacts with Hamas or have any contacts with Al-Qaeda or with ISIS or any of the other listed terrorist organizations that have been designated by the U.S. Treasury and by the State Department. However, banking institutions learn the very hard way that if they provide banking services to any of the terror organizations, then the banks are going to find themselves both criminally and civilly liable. And a number of terror victims in cases we've been involved with, we've been going after the banks and after the banking system. And little by little, after 9/11, the Patriot Act was passed, Know Your Customer laws were passed, and the banks have continued, learned the hard way to discontinue having any contacts or any services they're providing to the terror groups. However, there seems to be this idea that you can't have contacts with terror groups doesn't extend to Palo Alto, where the internet companies, where the social media companies are providing social media pages and social media accounts to designated terrorist groups. If you look in the booklet that we prepared, you'll see that all of the Middle East terror groups seem to have Facebook page, Instagram pages, and Google, be able to use Google and YouTube freely, okay? As Nitzana suggested, there would be no ISIS today without YouTube. There would be no Facebook, or Twitter and Facebook and Instagram all provide services to Hamas and to other terror groups. If you look in here, we have different pages of different designated terror organizations or different terrorist leaders, the heads of Hamas, the heads of Hezbollah TV, Al-Manar TV. They all have internet, they're all using the internet, they're all using U.S. technology, they're all using U.S. Social media platforms to advance their work, to do training, to provide, disseminate their propaganda, to do fundraising, to recruit members. And this is just crazy because on one hand, it's illegal for these companies to be providing, Facebook pages to the head of Hamas because he's a designated terrorist under U.S. law, and nobody else is allowed to be in any way involved with him. And on the other hand, he's been given a free pass by U.S. law enforcement. We had written letters and point this out to the previous administration, to the Attorney General under Eric Holder and to Attorney General Lynch, and we got absolutely no response there. We're now trying with, under the new Trump administration, with Sessions and with other U.S. officials, and to warn them that the terror organizations are all using U.S. social media platforms. And for the Jewish community and for other communities that care about the spread of terrorism, this has been a gigantic disaster. So we were asking, we're going to be asking members of Congress to be looking into this, into the Justice Department to look into this, and the Treasury to look into this, and to try to figure out how we can stop the use of this U.S. technology of the social media platforms by terror groups. Just the mere fact that they are even provided any services by U.S. Or companies is illegal, and this has got to be stopped, and they should be immediately shut down. And this will have a very, very positive effect in the efforts to combat Middle East terrorism and terrorism from other quarters. Thank you.
Well, I got here as quickly as I could. I'm glad I could be with you. It's a sobering occasion, but it's an important time to reflect and to work on what we can do to help combat terrorism and bring stability and peace to the Middle East. And this is one big step in the right direction. Before I say anything else, though, tomorrow is the 2-year anniversary of the tragedy of Robbie and Scott's son being taken away by a senseless act of violence. So if you could just join me for a moment of silence. Thank you. Well, Sarah, you are doing so much through Emmett. Appreciate what you do. Stuart and Robbie have been stalwarts in this whole process, and we appreciate you. I can't imagine what they have gone through, but this is a way that we can bring good from that senseless act of violence. If we can stop the Palestinian Authority from giving money to terrorists or their surviving families if they get killed, that will take away incentives from people to commit acts of violence. Because we're talking about a dysfunctional, mismanaged society where people have largely no hope for the future in many cases. And they will look to this as a source of revenue. That is not good. That's not right. And if they continue doing that, let's at least not have taxpayer dollars from our hard-earned American citizens going to that purpose. Let's at least stop funding them as a country. So I stand behind what we're doing with the Taylor Force Act. I'm proud to be the House sponsor of it, but we've had many co-sponsors. We had great response in the Foreign Affairs Committee. Ed Royce and Elliot Engel were able to join hands with me in getting this passed, make a few minor modifications. But now we do face a hurdle in the Senate. The Senate needs to take action. I want to see them recognize this as a standalone piece of legislation. I think the memory of Taylor Force deserves that. I think the importance of this issue deserves that, to give it the prominence that it should have. Now, there's the possibility that because the Senate, by and large, is in favor of this, and that's wonderful, they may put it in an omnibus bill where it'll be buried with 1,000 other measures. I don't want to see that happen. I want to see this as a standalone piece of legislation. So any influence that you have with any senator, please use that influence today. Ask them to bring this up for a vote. Ask the majority leader, Mitch McConnell, to have a vote on this. Everyone that's publicly asked, do they support this, they'll say yes. There are 1 or 2 people anonymously, for whatever reason, and it might even be an unrelated reason, who have a hold on this piece of legislation, and it's not moving forward as quickly as it should. So that's the obstacle we're having. The House has done its job. We passed this by unanimous consent. So the House has done its job. The Senate needs to act next. So that's my request to every one of you. That's what I'm going to be doing. Sarah, I know that's what you, Robbie and Scott, I know that's what you are going to be doing as well. And we're going to get this over the finish line and do justice. Thank you.
The real problem we're facing, at least in the courts, is that the judges, the federal judges and the district courts are interpreting the Communications Decency Act in a way they're saying basically you can't hold the social media companies liable for anything. Just as a quick history, basically when the internet started, the providers of like America Online and NetVision, all the early companies, were concerned that they would be sued for content online, right? Like newspapers could be sued if they publish libelous or slanderous, libelous, any sort of material. So they asked that there would sort of be this immunity from prosecution or any sort of civil liability. And so basically it made sense, that if somebody was posting on their account some information which wasn't accurate or was libelous, that you wouldn't hold America Online responsible. For instance, if I libel another person, the person could sue me. They shouldn't be allowed to sue America Online. However, this has been expanded to that the internet companies are claiming they're not responsible for anything. They're not responsible for pornography that's posted online. They're not responsible for bullying. They're not responsible for anything, and they have no obligations, and they're claiming you can't hold them as the publisher. And so this is the big problem. We're saying that, okay, in terms of libel, maybe they should be immune, and maybe you can't sue America Online or Facebook for libelous postings. On the other hand, they do have the technology, they have the logarithms, they have the filters, they have the ability to stop certain things. You can't post child pornography on Facebook, you just can't do it. You just aren't able to, it won't go up there. So since they have the filters to look out for that type of content, they also have the filters and the logarithms to search out a terrorist content or calls to extremist violence or anti-Semitic materials. The question is, it's just a matter of will. They're not going to do it unless they're forced to do it. So somebody has to clarify either through a standalone bill or a modification to the Communications Decency Act. And somebody's got to either add to the Communications Decency Act that this will not apply to the Anti-Terrorism Act or to aiding and abetting terrorism, and then that would be a big shot over the bow of the internet companies. And so we're not exactly sure or even recommending how the law needs to be fixed, but Congress and the Senate and the Justice Department needs to be looking at this very, very seriously and figuring out how it is that these companies are provided pages, and somehow when you go into federal court and say, how is the head of Hezbollah have an Instagram account, or how is he tweeting, or how is Hezbollah TV have which is a designated terror organization, how does that have its own Facebook page? What's going on, and nobody's policing this. Ironically, in Europe, where they don't have as big, they look at the American internet companies with a much different eye than, say, the previous Democratic administration, when the internet companies and the people like Zuckerberg were big donors to the Democratic Party, so they look at it much, much differently. And they're, ironically, Europe is way ahead of the U.S. in insisting that the internet, the social media providers, are starting to regulate themselves, or they're threatening that they're going to come in and do it. And we've seen the foreign minister of England, of the UK, and certain EU officials have been saying that there has to be a sea change here, because the internet is the Wild West, and the social media platforms are aiding and abetting terrorism, which is resulting in the deaths of Americans, Israelis, and other innocent people. Listen, there has been some, criminal prosecutions, or there has been some governments that have been active. I know Germany has been active in telling some of the social media platforms that they can't allow them to provide services like this. We could file civil suits in different countries. There's, we tried to bring cases in countries where we think we can win and where it won't get bogged down in very, very expensive litigation. Sometimes litigating in certain jurisdictions, you have to put a very, very high cost, fees up front, which is sometimes a percentage of what you're suing for, and it becomes a problem. Also, you need the right case. You'd have to find a reason why you're bringing the case in Germany or in some other country like France, either a French citizen or what have you. We represent several victims of ISIS attacks, families, American families, and others who were caught up either in the Paris attack. We have a family from California that we represent, a family from the Brussels, Belgium attack, and somebody from the who was in the Istanbul nightclub attack. All U.S. citizens were suing. So some of these cases could be brought obviously overseas, but we're not going to go into Istanbul to go litigate there for a lot of different reasons. And we just felt like if we could somehow, use the U.S. Families, the U.S. victims, and the American courts, which are, from our perspective, some of the best places to litigate, that we could get somewhere. But we're seeing the district courts, first of all, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, every time we bring the cases in like New York or some other jurisdiction, they're all trying to move the cases back to the courts in Northern California, which is their home court, right? And so we're trying to not have the cases necessarily heard in Northern California, where companies like Facebook are the largest employers in the state, what have you. So it's a problem. I mean, but these are the early days of the internet, and these are the early days of these cases. These are really the first time anybody came and sued social media and said, this isn't just a money-making endeavor in which you get billions of dollars and you have no responsibility to anywhere, and you just do whatever you want and ride roughshod over the rights of other people, or over the national security interests of other people, or in which you endanger other people's lives and you're not responsible and you have this big shield. So these are the first cases, and just like our organization worked to pioneer, and Emmett and other groups worked to pioneer, the first lawsuits under the Anti-Terrorism Act, these are the first cases against the social media platforms, and we're hopeful that just as banks learned the lesson, unfortunately the hard way, that they have to know their customers and can't move money to terror groups, that eventually the social media platforms are going to learn either the easy way or the hard way, that they can't provide services to designated terror groups, or they're going to find themselves both criminally and civilly liable.
Let me just add to this. You can try to file lawsuits against Facebook, Twitter, and others in different cases, different places around the world. They always challenge jurisdiction. We had cases in Israel going on against Facebook, and the first allegation is a motion to dismiss based on jurisdiction. In the United States, they cannot raise these arguments. They're based here, they run their offices here. Even though they prefer to litigate these cases in California, where their headquarters are, they still have office in New York that has 1,700 employees. They cannot really change the venue so easily. In addition, the Anti-Terrorism Act is uniquely to the United States. There is no other country in the world that finds someone responsible for aiding and abetting terrorism. It's a new law, it's a unique law. In other jurisdictions, Israel, Europe, and other countries, if you want to sue the social media network, you would count only on negligence. That's the only cause of action you can bring if you want to sue this social network. And negligence is not enough. To come and say that the social media network is negligent doesn't serve our purpose. We want to find them accountable. We want to get a judgment that says that they are aiding and abetting terrorism. Because in addition to the hundreds of millions of dollars that we have to pay in compensations, they will have a judgment like this against them, which I'm almost positive they would not like. So this is one of the reasons why we're bringing these cases in the United States.
Right. So I mean, bitcoins, cryptocurrencies are one of the new wild wests of international terrorism. While the previous work or campaigns were to try to stop the banks from moving money and transferring money and make them very afraid through sanctions and lawsuits and criminal prosecutions. It can make them afraid to move money and to not know who their customers are. Up comes cryptocurrencies, bitcoins, and all the others, which is proving to be a big nightmare now for the intelligence and law enforcement, which are just not up to speed on these things. We've spoken with Israelis and intelligence, with the Shin Bet and with people in the other divisions about the cryptocurrencies. They're very concerned about it. They know that some of the terror groups are using cryptocurrencies for fundraising. We saw websites from a group in Gaza which said you can donate to them using bitcoins. The Israelis were watching to see who donated, who didn't donate. Can't really speak any further about that, but the point is that the cryptocurrencies, by definition, are supposed to be very liquid and anonymous, and therefore their whole purpose is to end run around the banking system. And just as we're hoping that the banking system is getting under control and through the sanctions and the lawsuits, you have them basically really trying to make sure that they're not moving for money for outlaw regimes like Iran or for terror groups. Up comes the bitcoins. So basically the problem is that bitcoins are almost like a sort of casino chip. You come in and you find a point of entry where you buy them, and then you can just they're just basically a code. They're part of the blockchain, right? So they're a long piece of code, and whoever knows the code can kind of take the code and they can cash out the Bitcoin or the portion of the Bitcoin, because you can divide up Bitcoins. So people in the U.S., I mean, if you go in to buy Bitcoins, frequently the exchanges or the places you buy them know who you are, because you have to present some sort of ID. But there's plenty of places around the world where nobody knows who's buying the Bitcoin. And there's places like in Lebanon where you can cash out Bitcoins, and there's plenty of places in Asia where you can anonymously buy Bitcoins, in Singapore and China. So there's a situation where terrorists are able, or Iran is able, to go in, buy Bitcoins, and just give the code to somebody on the other side, and they're able to go in and cash them out. Fortunately, the Bitcoins are not that liquid yet. There's not that many places that want to move tens of millions of dollars or give you money for tens of millions of dollars of Bitcoins yet. But little by little, their legitimacy is growing, and their ability to move money is growing. And so for the law enforcement, this is a big, big problem. Nobody has an answer yet, and nobody yet knows the extent of it. Even here in Washington, we've spoken with different experts who claim they had a little bit of a clue, but it's really the very first time that law enforcement is beginning to look at this, and nobody yet has really figured it out. Also, you have countries like North Korea, which have entire divisions of their army, of the military units, whose entire purpose is to just go and steal Bitcoins online. And so the cryptocurrencies are becoming a big, big battlefield now for terrorism and for rogue states like North Korea and Iran and Syria. And you're going to be hearing a lot about that in the future, just as the banks in the 90s and the early 2000s were the battlefield. Now cryptocurrencies are going to